They hadn't eaten in 48 hours, and the only thing keeping them upright was each other. Behind the grocery store on Maple Avenue, where the dumpsters hummed and the smell of spoiled lettuce clung to the cold night air, 8-year-old Emma Whitaker wrapped both arms around her little sister like she was trying to hold the world together with bone and willpower. Lily Whitaker's cheek pressed against Emma's thin jacket, her small fingers fisted in the fabric as if letting go would mean disappearing. The neon sign above the loading dock flickered in tired blue pulses, throwing weak light over the cracked asphalt and the cardboard boxes stacked like forgotten furniture. Inside the store, warm rotisserie chickens turned slowly under golden heat lamps, and shoppers pushed carts heavy with milk gallons and family-sized cereal boxes. But out here, the air felt 10 degrees colder, sharper, emptier. Emma could hear the automatic doors whoosh open every few minutes, could almost taste the bread baking somewhere beyond the brick wall, and her stomach tightened so hard it made her dizzy. Lily's whisper was barely audible. "I'm not hungry anymore," she said the way children say things when the feeling is too big to name. Emma knew that wasn't true. She hadn't told Lily that the last granola bar was gone, or that the car where they'd been sleeping was no longer in the parking lot after sunrise. She just kept rocking slightly back and forth, counting the seconds between breaths, promising in a voice she tried to keep steady that she would figure something out. Because that's what big sisters do, even when they're just kids themselves. The wind shifted and carried the smell of fresh bread across the loading dock, warm and sweet, cruel in its comfort. Emma swallowed hard and tightened her arms around Lily as a delivery truck rumbled somewhere nearby, its engine idling low like distant thunder. The asphalt beneath them still held a trace of daytime warmth, but the temperature was dropping fast, sliding toward the low 40s, and Lily's sneakers were thin enough that Emma could feel her sister's toes trembling through the rubber soles. Emma glanced toward the glowing windows of the store, watching silhouettes move past shelves stacked 12 feet high with everything a family could want on a Tuesday night. She imagined a kitchen table under soft yellow light plates set out a gallon of 2% milk sweating on the counter. Her stomach cramped again, sharp and sudden, and she pressed her palm against it, pretending she was just adjusting her jacket. Lily shifted and looked up with wide blue eyes that reflected the flickering neon above them. "Are we going home soon?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Emma forced a smile that did not quite reach her eyes and brushed a strand of pale hair from Lily's forehead. "Yeah," she whispered, because the truth felt too heavy to place between them. Home had been the back seat of their old sedan, parked near the edge of the lot, the windows fogging up at night, while Emma counted the stars through the windshield. But that car was gone now, and with it, the last thin layer of privacy they had left. A shopping cart clattered somewhere close, and Emma instinctively pulled Lily tighter, shrinking into the shadow between two dumpsters, hoping no one would notice two small shapes pressed together in the cold. Footsteps crunched over loose gravel on the other side of the loading dock, slow and distracted the sound of someone finishing a late shift and thinking about nothing more than getting home. Emma held her breath and lowered her head, hoping the dim light would blur them into the background like forgotten trash bags. Lily's hand tightened in her jacket again, and Emma could feel the faint tremor running through her sister's small body. The automatic doors at the front of the store sighed open, and shut each time, spilling a rectangle of warm yellow light across the parking lot before snapping closed again. A couple laughed as they walked to their truck, plastic bags swinging from their wrists, and the scent of fried chicken drifted back toward the alley. Emma's stomach twisted so hard that spots flickered at the edge of her vision. She had tried earlier that afternoon to ask a woman near the carts if there were any change she could spare, but the words had dried up in her throat, replaced by the hot sting of embarrassment. She was 8 years old and already understood the difference between being seen and being invisible. Now she pressed her chin against Lily's hair and whispered stories about pancakes stacked high with syrup, about Saturday mornings when cartoons filled the living room and their mother used to hum along with the radio. Lily listened quietly, as if the words themselves were food. Somewhere above them, a security camera rotated with a faint mechanical click, its red light blinking against the dark brick wall, watching everything and saying nothing. Inside the small security office near the front registers, Michael Reynolds leaned back in a worn swivel chair and rubbed his eyes watching the black and white monitors cycle through their nightly routine. He had worked at Maple Avenue Market for 3 years now, long enough to know the rhythm of closing time, long enough to recognize the difference between teenagers looking for trouble and someone who simply had nowhere else to stand. The camera over the loading dock flickered onto the main screen, and at first he almost looked away, expecting to see nothing more than stacked pallets and empty crates. Then he noticed 2 small shapes pressed into the narrow space between the dumpsters. He leaned forward, adjusting the focus, his breath slowing as the image sharpened. 2 little girls. One taller, shoulders squared in a way that did not match her age. One smaller, tucked into the older girl's side like a shadow that refused to drift away. Michael felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen shoplifters before. He had called security on grown men who tried to walk out with cases of beer under their jackets. But this was different. The taller girl was rocking slightly back and forth, her chin resting on the younger one's head. The younger girl's sneakers dangled an inch above the ground, as if her legs were too tired to hold her steady. Michael glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 10:23 at night, too late for children to be anywhere near a loading dock. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the radio clipped to his belt. Company policy was clear. If there were minors lingering after hours, you called it in. But policy did not show you the way the older girl kept scanning the shadows, like she was bracing for something she could not name. Michael exhaled slowly, stood up and reached for his jacket. He told himself he was only going to check on them. Just to see. Nothing more. The metal door to the loading dock creaked softly as Michael pushed it open, and a slice of fluorescent light cut across the pavement before settling on the stacked crates and the 2 small figures in the shadows. Emma stiffened immediately, her body going rigid as she pulled Lily closer, instinct replacing thought. She heard the door before she saw the man, and every warning she had ever absorbed without words rushed through her at once. Michael stepped out slowly, making sure his hands were visible, the cool night air brushing against his face. He stopped several feet away, careful not to close the distance too quickly. Up close, the girls looked even smaller than they had on the monitor. The older one's jacket hung loose at the shoulders, and the younger girl's eyelids drooped as if sleep was trying to claim her right there on the asphalt. "Hey," Michael said gently, keeping his voice low and even. "You two okay?" Emma did not answer. She lifted her chin slightly, blue eyes sharp, despite the exhaustion, positioning herself half a step in front of Lily. Michael noticed the protective stance immediately. He had seen it before years ago in mirrors he no longer kept. "I am not here to get you in trouble," he added, taking another cautious step forward but stopping well outside their reach. "It is almost closing time. It is cold out here. Do you have someone coming to pick you up?" Lily shifted and pressed her face into Emma's side, whispering something too soft to hear. Emma swallowed and shook her head once, a small motion that carried too much weight. Michael's gaze drifted briefly toward the parking lot, then back to the girls. He could see the tremor in their hands, now the pale tightness around their mouths. "Have you eaten tonight?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, fragile and undeniable. Emma hesitated, her jaw tightening, as if the answer might betray something she was trying desperately to protect. She had learned that questions from adults often came with consequences, and consequences usually meant being separated from Lily. Michael waited without pressing, keeping his posture relaxed, the light from the open door stretching behind him across the pavement. After a long moment, Emma shook her head again, slower this time. "We are fine," she said quietly, though her voice lacked conviction. Lily shifted, peeking out from behind her sister's arm, her eyes landing on the glow spilling from inside the store. "I am hungry," Lily whispered before Emma could stop her. The words were soft, but they landed heavily in the cold night air. Emma closed her eyes briefly, frustration and embarrassment flickering across her face, not at Lily but at herself. Michael felt something inside him give way. He recognized that look, the fierce determination to hold everything together even when it was already falling apart. "Okay," he said gently, nodding once as if they had just agreed on something simple. "That is something we can fix." He did not move toward them yet. Instead, he crouched down slowly so he was closer to their height, making himself smaller, less imposing. "My name is Michael. I work here. I can bring you some food. You do not have to come inside if you do not want to. I can bring it out here." Emma studied him carefully, searching for signs of impatience or deception. All she saw was a tired man in a store jacket, his breath visible in the cold air, his eyes steady and calm. "We do not have money," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael shook his head gently. "I am not asking for any." The automatic doors sighed again in the distance, and the warmth from inside seemed to pulse against the night like a promise. Emma looked down at Lily, who was swaying slightly on her feet, and something inside her finally loosened, just enough to nod. Michael stood slowly, careful not to break the fragile trust forming in the space between them, and stepped back toward the metal door. "I will be right back," he said, keeping his tone steady. Emma watched every movement, her body still angled protectively in front of Lily, ready to run if she sensed anything shift. The door closed behind him with a muted thud, and the thin beam of light disappeared, leaving the alley dim again, except for the flicker of neon and the blinking red eye of the security camera. Lily looked up at her sister, hope and uncertainty mixing across her small face. "Is he really coming back?" she asked softly. Emma did not answer right away. She listened to the muffled sounds from inside the store carts, rolling a register drawer, closing, someone laughing near the exit. The world continued as if nothing unusual was happening just beyond the brick wall. "I think so," Emma finally said, though doubt still lingered in her chest. Minutes felt longer when you were hungry. Every second stretched thin. The cold crept deeper, sliding through the worn fabric of their clothes, and Emma shifted her weight to keep feeling in her toes. She wondered what would happen if someone else came instead, someone less patient, someone who followed policy instead of instinct. The thought tightened her throat. Then the door opened again, brighter this time, and Michael stepped out holding 2 brown paper bags pressed against his chest. The smell reached them before the words did, warm and unmistakable. Fresh bread, soup, something sweet. Lily's eyes widened and she took an unconscious half-step forward before catching herself. Michael stopped several feet away again and knelt down, setting the bags gently on the ground between them like an offering. "Nothing fancy," he said quietly. "Just something warm." Steam curled into the night air from the top of a small container, visible even in the dim light, and for the first time that evening Emma felt something other than fear move through her chest. For a moment, none of them moved. The steam rising from the soup curled into the cold air like a quiet invitation, and Lily's eyes followed it as if it might disappear. Emma studied the bags, carefully searching for a catch, for some hidden condition that would pull everything out from under them again. Michael kept his distance, resting back on his heels, giving them space to decide. "It is just food," he said softly. "You can eat it right here." Lily's stomach made a small sound that felt louder than the traffic humming on the road beyond the parking lot. Emma exhaled slowly and stepped forward first, never releasing her grip on her sister's hand. She knelt down and opened the top of one paper bag, revealing a container of chicken noodle soup, 2 thick slices of white bread wrapped in deli paper, and a small apple. The warmth hit her face immediately, and for a second, her vision blurred from the sudden rush of relief. Lily dropped to her knees beside her, watching every movement with wide eyes. Emma handed the soup to her carefully. Slow, she whispered, even though her own hands were shaking. Lily lifted the plastic spoon with both hands and took a cautious sip. Her shoulders loosened almost instantly, and a soft sound escaped her, something close to a sigh. Emma took a bite of bread, chewing slowly at first, then faster as the reality of it settled in. Michael looked away briefly, giving them privacy, though he could hear the quiet rhythm of eating, the small, grateful silence that follows the first real meal after too long without one. The neon light flickered again overhead, but it no longer felt as harsh. For the first time that night, the alley did not feel entirely abandoned. It felt like a fragile pause balanced between what had been lost and what might still be possible. The warmth from the soup began to return, feeling to Lily's fingers, and a faint pink color crept back into her cheeks as she took another careful spoonful. Emma ate more slowly now, as if she was afraid the food might vanish if she moved too fast. Michael remained kneeling several feet away, giving them quiet space while keeping watch over the nearly empty lot. A cold gust swept through the alley, rattling the loose lid of a dumpster and carrying the distant hum of traffic from the highway less than half a mile away. The store lights inside flickered slightly as employees began shutting down registers one by one. Closing time was minutes away. Emma noticed the shift immediately. She had learned to read environments the way other children read storybooks. The rhythm was changing. Soon there would be no customers, no casual noise, no buffer between them and whatever came next. "We cannot stay here all night," Michael said gently after a few moments, careful not to startle them. Emma's shoulders tensed again. Lily looked up, confusion flickering across her small face. "Where do you live?" Michael asked, his voice calm and measured. Emma stared at the asphalt for a long second before answering. "We were in our car," she said quietly. "It was over there." She pointed toward the far edge of the lot, where only empty parking spaces now stretched under the dim lights. Michael followed her gesture. "Was he?" asked softly. Emma nodded once. "It was gone when we woke up." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of something final. Michael exhaled slowly, understanding settling in piece by piece. The car had likely been towed that morning after sitting too long in one spot. That meant the girls had been on foot all day. That meant there was no backup plan waiting around the corner. Inside the store, a manager's voice echoed faintly over the intercom, announcing closing time. The automatic doors locked with a sharp click. The night seemed to grow quieter all at once. Emma gathered the empty containers carefully and placed them back into the paper bag, as if tidiness could prove they were not trouble. She looked at Michael with guarded eyes. "We will leave," she said quickly. "We do not want problems." Michael studied the two of them under the flickering neon light, the protective stance, the exhaustion that no child should carry. He knew policy required him to call authorities for unattended minors. He also knew that if he made that call right now, these sisters could be separated before sunrise. The weight of that choice settled heavily on his chest as the cold night pressed in around all three of them. The night settled heavier after the doors locked, sealing the bright world inside the store, away from the dim parking lot. Michael stood slowly, brushing his hands against his jeans as he looked at the two sisters under the flickering neon light. Emma was already rising to her feet, pulling Lily up with her, as if preparing to disappear before anyone could force a different outcome. The paper bag crinkled softly in her grip. "We will go," Emma repeated, her voice steady but tight, the kind of steadiness that comes from too much practice. Lily swayed slightly beside her, full now, but exhausted, her small hand gripping Emma's sleeve. Michael felt the familiar pull of responsibility pressing against his ribs. Company policy was clear. Unattended minors meant a call to the police. The police meant paperwork reports and likely a call to Child Protective Services. He knew how that chain of events usually ended. Separate placements, temporary homes, different schools. Siblings promised they would see each other again. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they did not. "Where will you go?" Michael asked quietly. Emma's eyes shifted toward the dark edge of the lot, toward the sidewalk that led past the gas station and into a neighborhood of closed storefronts and silent houses. "We will figure it out," she said. It was the same answer she had been giving herself for days. Michael studied her face more closely now. Dirt smudged along her sleeve. A faint crease between her eyebrows that did not belong on an 8-year-old. Lily leaned against her sister, already half asleep on her feet. The temperature had dropped into the low 40s, and the wind carried a sharper bite. They could not stay outside all night. Michael's phone felt heavy in his pocket. One call would transfer responsibility away from him. It would follow the rules. It would also change everything for these girls before the clock struck midnight. He imagined Emma's protective stance breaking under fluorescent lights in a station lobby. He imagined Lily waking up in an unfamiliar room without her sister beside her. The thought tightened his chest. "Listen," he said carefully, choosing each word. "I cannot leave you out here. Not tonight." Emma's body tensed again, fear flashing across her face. "We did not steal anything," she said quickly. "We did not do anything wrong." Michael shook his head immediately. "I know. That is not what this is about." He glanced toward the silent storefront, then back at them. The decision was balancing on a thin edge now, and he knew whichever direction he stepped would carry consequences far beyond this cold parking lot. Emma felt the shift in his tone before she fully understood the words, and fear tightened her grip on Lily's hand. Adults always said things like that right before everything changed. "We can handle it," she insisted softly, lifting her chin with a courage that did not match her small frame. "We always do." Lily leaned heavier against her side now, her eyelids drooping, the warmth from the soup fading into exhaustion. Michael saw the tremble return to the younger girl's knees and knew they were running on nothing but stubborn will. He glanced at his phone again, the screen dark but waiting. One call would bring flashing lights, official voices, structured help. It would also bring questions Emma might not be ready to answer. "Where is your mom?" he asked carefully. Emma's expression shifted. Not anger, not exactly sadness, but something more complicated. "She said she would be back," Emma replied, eyes fixed somewhere beyond him. "She always says that." The words were simple, but the space after them carried days of waiting. Michael did not press further. He had heard enough stories to understand what silence often meant. The wind swept across the lot again, cutting sharper this time, and Lily shivered openly. Michael removed his jacket without thinking and stepped forward just enough to offer it. Emma hesitated, scanning his face one more time, then nodded once. He draped the jacket gently over Lily's shoulders, careful not to crowd them. "I am not going to call anyone right this second," he said quietly, choosing honesty over reassurance. "But I cannot pretend I did not find you either." Emma's jaw tightened. "They will take her away from me," she said, her voice barely audible. That fear was not imagined. It was learned. Michael met her gaze steadily. "I do not want that to happen." The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows that stretched toward the empty street. The night felt larger now, pressing in from every side. Michael knew that doing nothing was no longer an option. The question was not whether to act. The question was how to act without breaking the only thing these two sisters had left, which was each other. Michael remained still for a long moment, the cold air settling between them as heavily as the decision forming in his mind. He could feel the weight of his own past rising quietly to the surface, memories he did not often revisit. He remembered standing in a similar parking lot when he was 9 years old, holding a plastic grocery bag with everything he owned inside it, listening to adults discuss his future as if he were not 10 feet away. He remembered the sound of a car door closing and the strange silence that followed when you realize you are being placed somewhere new. That silence had followed him for years. He looked at Emma again, and saw the same guarded strength he once carried like armor. "I am not trying to separate you," he said carefully, meeting her eyes so she would hear the truth in his voice. "I know what that feels like." Emma studied him, uncertain but listening. Lily shifted under the jacket, her small hands gripping the fabric as if it were the only stable thing left in the world. The lot was nearly silent now. The employees had gone home. The store lights dimmed further behind the locked doors. "There is a way to do this without rushing into sirens and paperwork tonight," Michael continued. "I can make a call in the morning. There are temporary options. Emergency placements where siblings stay together. I can ask questions before anyone moves you." Emma's breath caught slightly at the word together. "You promise?" she asked, her voice fragile but direct. Michael did not answer quickly. Promises were not something he made lightly. "I promise I will fight to keep you in the same place," he said finally. The distinction mattered. Emma seemed to weigh those words carefully, as if testing their balance. Lily's head drooped against her sister's arm again, sleep pulling harder now that her stomach was no longer empty. The temperature had dipped below 40 degrees, and the wind carried the faint scent of gasoline from the nearby road. They could not remain in this lot until morning. Michael drew in a slow breath, understanding that the next step would define everything that followed. He could either follow the rulebook without question, or he could choose to stand between policy and two frightened children just long enough to find a better way. Michael felt the decision land in his chest, with a weight that was both terrifying and undeniable. The cold wind swept across the parking lot again, tugging at Lily's borrowed jacket, and Emma instinctively pulled her closer, as if the night itself might try to take her. "You said you would fight for us," Emma whispered, her voice trembling now despite all her effort to keep it steady. "But what if they do not listen to you?" The question sliced through him because he did not have a perfect answer. He had no legal authority beyond being a store manager who happened to step outside at the right moment. Yet he also knew that walking back through that metal door and making the standard call would mean surrendering these girls to a system that moved quickly and did not always look back. Lily stirred weakly and wrapped both arms around Emma's waist. "I do not want to go somewhere without her," Lily murmured, half asleep but fiercely certain. Emma's composure cracked then, cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, not loud, not dramatic, just silent and exhausted. "I promised Mom I would take care of her," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I promised." Michael felt something inside him break open. He had made promises once, too, promises to protect his younger brother when their own home fell apart. He had not been strong enough back then. He had watched strangers drive his brother away to a different county, promising visitation schedules that never quite lined up. He had carried that regret for over 30 years. He could not let history echo itself in this empty parking lot. He stepped closer now, not enough to crowd them, but enough to stand in the same circle of light. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion he did not try to hide. "You did not fail anyone. You are 8 years old. You are not supposed to carry the world." Emma's tears spilled over despite her attempt to blink them back. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across 3 figures standing on cracked asphalt at nearly 11 o'clock at night. The world felt suspended, as if everything depended on what happened in the next few minutes. Michael reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and stared at the dark screen. He could dial emergency services, or he could call someone else first. Someone he trusted. Someone who understood children and emergency placements. His thumb hovered over the contact list as Emma watched him with silent desperation, knowing that whichever number he chose would change their lives before sunrise. Michael's thumb moved before fear could stop it pressing the name he had not called in years. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, each tone stretching across the empty parking lot like a countdown. Emma watched his face instead of the screen, searching for clues in every flicker of expression. Lily's small fingers clutched the front of Emma's jacket, her breathing uneven as sleep and anxiety battled for control. On the fourth ring, a familiar voice answered, groggy but alert. "David, it is Michael," he said quietly, turning slightly away to shield the conversation from the wind while never taking his eyes off the girls. "I need help. Not police, not yet." He listened, nodding once. "Two sisters, 8 and 6. No place to go tonight." There was a pause longer this time, and Emma's chest tightened so sharply she could hear her own pulse. She had learned to read silence. Silence meant maybe. Silence meant paperwork. Silence meant strangers. Michael's voice lowered further. "They cannot be separated," he said firmly. "I will vouch for them. I will stay involved. I just need somewhere safe until morning." The neon sign above them buzzed again, casting unsteady light across his face. He stepped closer without realizing it, as if physically placing himself between the girls and the uncertainty ahead. Emma's tears had dried, now replaced by a quiet, fierce watchfulness. She was bracing for disappointment. Michael listened again, his jaw tightening, then slowly exhaled. "Thank you," he said, the words carrying a weight of relief that softened his shoulders. He ended the call and looked directly at Emma. "My friend works with emergency placements," he explained gently. "There's a licensed foster home 10 minutes from here that keeps siblings together whenever possible. They have a spare room tonight." Emma did not speak immediately. Hope was dangerous. Hope made the fall harder. "You are coming too?" she asked. Michael nodded without hesitation. "I will drive behind you. I will stay until you are settled. And in the morning, I will be there when paperwork starts. I will not disappear." The promise hung in the cold air, fragile but real. Lily lifted her head slightly. "We stay together," she whispered. Michael crouched down so he was eye level with both of them. "Yes," he said firmly. "You stay together." For the first time since the metal door had opened hours earlier, Emma's shoulders dropped just a fraction, as if she could finally allow herself to believe that maybe the night would not swallow them whole. The drive across town felt longer than 10 minutes, even though the dashboard clock insisted otherwise. Emma sat in the back seat of the social worker's sedan, with Lily curled against her side, headlights streaking across the window like fleeting possibilities. Michael followed closely behind in his pickup truck, his hands tight around the steering wheel, unwilling to let their taillights drift out of sight even for a second. Every red light felt like a test of patience. Every turn carried the fragile weight of trust. Emma watched the dark neighborhoods pass by rows of modest houses with porch lights glowing warm against the night. She wondered what it would feel like to belong inside one of them, to walk through a front door without fear of being told to leave. Lily's breathing slowed steady now, the deep rhythm of a child who finally feels a measure of safety. When the sedan pulled into a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees stripped bare for winter, Emma's chest tightened again. A small blue house waited at the end of the circle, its porch light shining steady and bright. No flashing lights, no chaos. Just a door opening before they even reached the steps. A woman in her late 40s stood there, cardigan wrapped around her shoulders, eyes gentle but alert. She knelt down as Emma and Lily approached, lowering herself to their height without hesitation. "You must be Emma and Lily," she said softly. "I am Mrs. Carter. I have cocoa warming on the stove." The normalcy of the words nearly undid Emma. Cocoa. Stove. Warm. Lily blinked up at the house, then at her sister, waiting for permission. Emma looked back toward the street, just as Michael stepped out of his truck and gave her a small, steady nod. "I am here." She inhaled slowly, then squeezed Lily's hand. "We stay together," she whispered, reminding herself as much as her sister. They stepped forward as one. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry detergent. The air was warm, a solid 70 degrees that wrapped around them like a blanket. Mrs. Carter guided them to a small bedroom with two twin beds already made, matching quilts folded neatly at the foot. Emma stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking in the simple miracle of two pillows resting side by side. Michael lingered near the hall, watching as Lily climbed carefully onto one mattress and reached immediately for Emma's hand. And for the first time that night, Emma allowed herself to believe that the promise had held. Morning light filtered softly through pale curtains, laying gentle stripes across the twin beds where Emma and Lily had fallen asleep, still holding hands. For a few seconds, Emma did not move. She listened, no traffic rumbling inches from her ear, no cold wind sneaking through cracked windows, just the faint hum of a heater and the distant clink of dishes from the kitchen. The room smelled faintly of clean cotton and something sweet baking downstairs. Lily stirred beside her, blinking slowly, as if waking from a dream she was afraid to lose. "We are still together," Lily whispered, her voice thick with sleep. Emma nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her sister's face, feeling the steady warmth of 70 degrees instead of the biting chill of 40. Downstairs, Mrs. Carter moved gently around the kitchen, giving them space but preparing breakfast anyway. Michael arrived shortly after sunrise, carrying a folder under his arm and the same steady expression he had worn the night before. He sat at the kitchen table with Mrs. Carter and the social worker, discussing temporary guardianship paperwork and emergency placement guidelines. Words like sibling preservation and review hearing filled the room, but what mattered most was the simple agreement that Emma and Lily would not be separated. Emma stood in the doorway, listening, her heart pounding with every official term. When Michael noticed her, he gave a small, reassuring nod. "You are staying together," he said clearly, making sure she heard it above everything else. Relief moved through her slowly, like warmth returning to numb fingers. Breakfast that morning was scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice served in glasses that did not match, but felt solid and real. Lily smiled shyly at Mrs. Carter, and for the first time in days, she laughed at something simple and ordinary. Michael watched from across the table, understanding that this was only the beginning. There would be court dates, evaluations, long conversations about what came next. But the most fragile part had already been protected. Two sisters had crossed the longest night of their young lives without losing each other. And as sunlight filled the small blue house, it no longer felt like a temporary shelter. It felt like the first steady step toward something that could last. The following week unfolded with a rhythm none of them fully trusted yet, as if stability might vanish if they moved too quickly. Emma walked Lily to the small elementary school 3 blocks from Mrs. Carter's house, their fingers linked the entire way down sidewalks lined with early winter frost. The air carried the clean scent of cold mornings, and for the first time in days, Emma did not scan every passing car with suspicion. Michael attended the preliminary hearing at the county building, sitting in a stiff wooden chair while a judge reviewed the emergency placement. The room was quiet, professional, filled with measured voices and careful language. Michael spoke when asked, describing the night he found the girls, emphasizing their bond, the way Emma shielded Lily even while exhausted. He did not dramatize. He did not exaggerate. He simply told the truth. The social worker confirmed that Mrs. Carter's home met all requirements and that sibling placement had been prioritized. When the judge approved the temporary arrangement pending further review, Michael felt a tension release from his shoulders that he had not realized he was carrying. Later that afternoon, he stopped by the Blue House again. Lily ran to the door before Emma could stop her, her small sneakers thudding across the hardwood floor. "We got to color in school," she announced proudly, holding up a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Emma stood just behind her, more reserved but visibly lighter, the crease between her eyebrows softened. "They said we can stay here for now," she told Michael quietly. "Together." He nodded. "That is the plan." In the kitchen, Mrs. Carter prepared dinner while discussing tutoring options and counseling services, practical steps layered carefully over emotional healing. Emma listened closely, absorbing every detail. She still carried caution in her posture, but something else was forming alongside it. Hope. Not the reckless kind, the steady kind. The kind built from small, consistent actions. That evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of blue outside the living room window, Lily curled against Emma on the couch, already half asleep. Michael watched them for a moment before heading toward the door. He had stepped into their lives because of a camera feed and a cold night, but now he understood that his role would not end there. Rescue was not a single moment. It was a series of choices made again and again, each one protecting the fragile thread that kept two sisters side by side. Weeks turned into a steady routine that felt less temporary with each passing day. Emma learned the rhythm of the house, the way Mrs. Carter left the porch light on until everyone was inside, the way dinner was always served at 6 o'clock sharp. Lily adjusted more quickly, her laughter returning in small bursts that filled the living room during board games and homework time. At school, teachers noted how tightly the sisters stayed connected. Emma's watchful eyes always tracking Lily across the playground. Counseling sessions began quietly, giving Emma space to speak about responsibility that had grown too heavy for someone her age. She did not cry easily, but when she did, it came without shame now. Michael attended every review meeting, sitting beside Mrs. Carter and asking questions about long-term options. When it became clear that their mother would not regain custody in the near future, the conversation shifted toward permanency planning. The word adoption entered the room softly at first, then with increasing certainty. Emma listened carefully, her heart pounding, because permanency meant something bigger than safety. It meant belonging. One evening after a meeting at the county office, Michael drove behind Mrs. Carter's car again, just as he had on that first night. The motion felt familiar, but the fear was gone. When they gathered around the kitchen table later, Mrs. Carter spoke gently. "If it is what you both want," she said, "I would like you to stay here for good." Lily's response was immediate. She wrapped her arms around Mrs. Carter's waist without hesitation. Emma stayed still for a moment longer, searching the room for signs of uncertainty. Michael met her gaze and gave the same steady nod he had given before. "You are safe. You are together." Emma stepped forward, then her voice quiet but sure. "We want to stay," she said. The decision did not erase the past, but it built something solid in front of it. Court hearings followed, paperwork stacked, high, signatures placed carefully. And on the day the adoption was finalized, Emma squeezed Lily's hand inside the courtroom, the same way she had on cold asphalt weeks earlier. This time, however, the air was warm, the lights steady, and the future no longer felt like something they had to outrun. Spring arrived gently in the small blue house at the end of the cul-de-sac, bringing longer evenings and the scent of fresh-cut grass drifting through open windows. Emma and Lily rode their bikes in slow circles along the sidewalk, their laughter rising above the hum of sprinklers and distant lawnmowers. The world no longer felt like something to hide from. It felt navigable. On Saturdays, Mrs. Carter packed peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices into a cooler, and they drove to the park less than 5 miles away, where Lily insisted on feeding ducks pieces of bread crust. Emma still watched carefully, still positioned herself half a step closer to Lily than anyone else, but the tension in her shoulders had softened into habit rather than fear. Michael visited often, sometimes bringing board games, sometimes simply sitting at the kitchen table talking about school projects and spelling tests. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed across the hardwood floor, Lily ran to him without hesitation and wrapped her arms around his waist. Guess what she said, with a grin too wide to contain? "I got an A in reading." Michael laughed, lifting her gently before setting her back down. Emma stood nearby, holding a library book against her chest. "We are doing better," she said quietly, the statement simple but profound. Michael nodded. He had seen many difficult nights in his life, but few transformations this steady. Later that evening, as the sky turned soft pink outside the living room window, Emma and Lily curled up on the couch beneath a shared blanket. Their fingers intertwined automatically, not out of desperation now, but out of comfort. And in the quiet warmth of that room, the memory of cold asphalt felt farther away than it ever had before. By early summer, the house no longer felt like a placement. It felt like history in the making. Framed photos lined the hallway, now school portraits with shy smiles that grew more confident each month. Emma joined the local library reading club, spending afternoons stretched across her bed with chapter books stacked beside her. Lily practiced cartwheels in the backyard, her giggles floating over the wooden fence as Mrs. Carter clapped from the porch. The routine of ordinary life wrapped around them like a steady rhythm. One evening, Michael stopped by after work and found Emma sitting at the kitchen table finishing a homework assignment about heroes. She looked up thoughtfully when he asked about it. "I wrote about someone who makes a choice when it would be easier not to," she said, her voice calm but intentional. Michael did not respond immediately. He understood the weight behind those words. Later that night, as fireflies blinked in the warm air outside, Lily climbed into Emma's bed instead of her own, not out of fear, but because she simply wanted to whisper about tomorrow's field trip. "We do not have to hide anymore," Lily said softly. Emma brushed her sister's hair back and looked around the room they now called theirs, the matching quilts, the bookshelf, the small lamp casting steady light. "No," she answered. "We do not." Downstairs, Mrs. Carter turned off the last light in the living room, confident that both girls were safe under her roof, and somewhere beyond the quiet neighborhood, the world kept turning as it always had. The difference now was simple but powerful. Two sisters who once braced against the cold together were learning how to grow together instead. On a mild autumn afternoon, nearly a year after that cold night, Emma and Lily stood in front of Maple Avenue Market, holding small paper cups of hot chocolate, waiting for Mrs. Carter to finish chatting with a cashier inside. The store looked the same from the outside, the red letters bright against the brick, the automatic doors sliding open and closed with steady rhythm. But everything felt different now. Emma glanced toward the side of the building where the loading dock sat hidden from the main entrance. She could still picture the flickering neon, the cracked asphalt, the way she had wrapped her arms around Lily, as if she could block out the entire world. Lily followed her gaze and slipped her hand into Emma's without saying a word. This time they were not standing in the shadows. They were standing in the sunlight. Sweaters, clean stomachs, full, waiting to walk through the front doors like any other family. Michael stepped out of the store carrying a bag of groceries and smiled when he saw them. "Ready?" he asked. Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful but calm. "Yeah," she said. They walked past the corner of the building together, not to hide, but simply to take the shorter path to the car. Emma paused for just a second near the spot where everything had shifted. She did not feel fear anymore. She felt distance, growth. Lily squeezed her hand once before skipping ahead toward Mrs. Carter. As the car doors closed and the engine started, Emma looked back one last time. The place that had once been the edge of their world was now just another building on a busy street. And as they drove away under a sky painted soft gold, Emma understood something simple and steady. The night that could have broken them had instead bound them closer, leading them not into darkness, but into a life where holding each other was no longer about survival. It was about love. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know how you felt. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments below. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss our next heartfelt story. Click the end screen to watch more emotional journeys. See you in the next one.